Welcome to a special edition of An Afternoon Tea, Conversations on Career and Workforce Development and Practice. I'm Scott Solberg, Associate Director of the Center on Education and Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Our conversation today is one of four being co-sponsored and coordinated by the Chamber of Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, as part of their Adult Learner Series. The career and workforce development topics that we will be exploring focus on the ways that we as Wisconsin citizens can respond to the challenges we're facing as a result of globalization. Today's guest is Dennis Winters, who is an expert in economic analysis, modeling, and forecasting, was previously the Vice President and Director of Research for North Star Economics, where he prepared influential reports on strategies for maintaining a competitive workforce in today's new economy. He continues in his economic forecasting and workforce development strategies as Director of the Office of Economic Advisors with Wisconsin's Department of Workforce Development. The title of today's conversation is Knowledge is Power: Employment and Education Trends in Wisconsin's Changing Economy. Dennis, welcome to this special edition of our conversation series.
Thanks, Scott.
To begin, could you tell us a little bit about what your role is as an economic advisor? What does that mean exactly?
I head up the Office of Economic Advisors, the Department of Workforce Development, and what we do there is keep the Secretary, the Governor, the Legislature, the public, the press involved and informed on what is going on in Wisconsin's workforce and how it ties and interrelates with what's going on in the economy.
Okay, great. And generating a lot of reports that are also available publicly.
We generate papers, reports, a lot of data.
Okay. Well, there's a couple of background topics that I think are going to help us all understand the context of career and workforce development. Maybe if you could explain, I'm hoping in everyday language, what is the difference between this old economy and new economy? You've written on this a lot, and just help us kind of get those two groups together.
Well, as we view the old economy, it's one I think most of us can relate to. You had some resources in the area. You might be able to see them: the timber, the crops, the ore in the mine, and it came through, and you took it out, you turned it into product. Hopefully, some great economies of scale and some technology, and then depending on and it didn't require, say, a lot of broad intelligence because it was very much a physical type economy, and
hands-on economy.
Hands-on, right? And then the quality of life was just kind of an afterthought. I mean, if you ended up, in a place like Madison, great. Or some of the other fine areas we got around the state, perfect. Quality of life came with it. If you ended up in some, not so nice areas, you had to have the job. And in those cases, it was a lot of you went where the job was. And you may uproot the whole family, to find out, to go to where the job was. And that was easier if you only had, one spouse working, for one thing. And
if the job you were in was stable.
And if the job you were in was stable. It was going to be a good job and paid the mortgage and, was sufficient to supply you with a decent standard of living.
Right. And then how is the new economy different? You mentioned basically a wider range of skill sets are needed to be competitive now.
Right. As I say, the new economy, the new raw material is the gray matter between your ears, and in my case, not my hair, but the brain. And because we, in the U.S. in particular, in a lot of Western countries, we've developed from a brawn to a brain economy because we can't compete with the globe on just labor costs when I think the going rate of unskilled labor in the world is 98 cents an hour, right? We just can't compete at that level anymore. So we have to take up the technology, the Yankee ingenuity, and with that is going to be the need for a higher skilled workforce. Yeah,
no doubt. And then one other piece to this then. So one, the old economy in terms of things we did and the manufacturing part of things, and it was all based on that. Now we need a different economy based on not only the intellectual capabilities, but I assume some creativity, the ingenuity, all of the things that go with more of the social capital ideas of things. What about our state has been doing some innovative practices. I think of New North as one of those. And I was hoping you might be able to give some context of what makes New North unique. But New North is also, we're seeing other parts of the state trying out some of those ideas. But even as they're trying it out, New North is kind of the benchmark.
Right. I think New North, and New North is an economic development organization for 18-county region up in northeast Wisconsin, and they were at a time when they saw a lot of their jobs, their well-paying, their good-paying jobs going away, and the replacement wage was coming in about 85%. And at that time too, they were in an economic cycle, and they wanted to find out what can we do to rejuvenate our economy and bring it into the the new century. And what do we need to do? So a committed group, public-private partnership that came together and developed some economic strategies and are well on their way now at implementing many of them.
And when you talk about the who of New North, because it's we're going to be talking a lot about the citizens' role, things we can do as individuals, but here you have a context being set up and key stakeholders in this New North. I mean, that's part of what makes it so unique.
Well, and that's what makes it work well, is you've got committed CEOs from a lot of industries there. There's probably 30 that sit on the board. It's driven by the private sector. Some people have been there a long time. It's like Bob DeCoke at Bolt Construction is one of the co-chairs, and Kathy Seifert, who used to be executive vice president with Kimberly Clark. They're there. They've been there a long time. They're go-getters, and they're working it from that side. And then it's publicly staffed. So they have the resources that come in that way and can count on that to get it done while they go on with things they have to do day to day also.
And a key director leading this whole thing.
And they brought in Jerry Murphy, right, the executive director of New North now, and they raised some resources and they put it together. And I think what was important is they made a conscious effort to go out into the region and explain what it is they were doing, why they were doing it, and getting buy-in from the community. So it built some investment from the community at large and people that were willing to help out because they knew they were part of it.
And community, you've mentioned the CEOs. It also includes the workforce development boards.
Right.
And education. So you have not only the K-12, but the universities, you've got the tech college, 2-year colleges, all coming together with a common vision.
And you also have a lot of the economic development folks there. They're New Rep, which is economic developers through most of the county, or most of the counties in the area that have come together. So you've got CEOs, you've got public sector, you've got education and economic development, and to a large extent labor.
And are there any examples or just like quick indicators that things are working, that there's momentum built up?
Well, I think one of the big indicators is they just had this is a couple months ago now, I guess it was November, they just had their annual meeting, their Northeast Wisconsin Economic Summit. And there was, I think, roughly 900 people that showed. And now that rivals the economic summits that were put on for the whole state in Milwaukee for some years. So 900 people showed on their fourth, I think it might have been their fourth annual. So the momentum is there, it's carrying forward, there's a lot of interest to keep it going.
And their goal is to bring in businesses, and there's been some positive hits.
Right, their goal is to create new economic development activities to carry the whole region forward.
And what are some examples of businesses that have come in recently?
Well, some of the businesses have been there and they've turned over. I mean, we've seen a lot of growth, for example, in Oshkosh Truck because of a lot of the defense money that's come in there. Bay Ship, Italian company, bought into Bay Ship, and they're going to put another $100 million of investment into an existing facility. So that's telling you they're serious about it, and they're going to upgrade this thing to bring it forward. And they have a focus now on green energy, particularly in wind, because they have the manufacturing base and the expertise, design base, and they figure they can compete on some of the new industries that are coming through too.
So as an individual sitting in a community, in this case, say Manitowoc or in the New North region, and feeling like I'm losing a job or economically things aren't difficult, what you have with New North is a group trying to diversify and brainstorm new strategies to bring in different groups to keep the businesses we have, retool, and things like that.
And they're working off their asset base in the sense they're not throwing a baby out with the bathwater. They're staying with what they know best, which is a lot of manufacturing. They've got a lot of natural resources there. They've got a nice quality of life. So and a number of universities and tech colleges that we've talked about. So they're building on what they have for assets and integrating them very well.
Yeah. Now, what about the other parts of Wisconsin? We have other groups that are also building up similar kinds of organizations.
Right. There's a number of them across the state. You've got the group in Milwaukee. There's the group in Dane County Thrive. You've got Centergy in the Wausau area. You've got some Northwoods. You've got organizations on the western side, Seven Rivers and Momentum Chippewa. And they're at it trying to do similar things. And I think they're all at different stages in the process, right? And as a formal entity, New North formed up, maybe not earliest, but the most solid. And now that I think they've got probably the most momentum going forward. Although the other ones are, viable groups going forward too.
What do you see as perhaps the critical ingredients that allowed New North to really explode and maintain its vibrancy? As you indicated, 900 people showing up is a pretty strong indicator that people are buying in.
Well, a number of things. I think the fact that it's privately led, CEOs generally like to see results, and they'll hold people accountable. So there is a solid core of reportability and accountability, and they meet quite often to make sure things are on track. You've got some very committed folks in the workforce development boards that their whole job is to get people to work and develop careers. The universities and the tech colleges they're huge anchors in the communities. They've been there a long time, and they're in the same role to develop the economic development through the workforce, and as that applies. And they're working very well together. They got the buy-in in the early part, and they spent a fair amount of money on marketing. So there's a brand, and they've enlisted the players that and asked them how they can help. Yeah.
So obviously the need for some capital and startup and the business community really led the charge. In making that happen.
Right. It kicked off with funds from the private sector and then was matched by some state money early on.
And it just also seems that when you have so many different cultures coming together, there had to be some leadership that really put down the gloves and the silos and just said, we're going to work across. I'm just thinking in terms of each area wanting to compete naturally for resources and saying, no, we're going to work together across chambers.
And the group involved has shown a lot of leadership that way to kind of be above the fray, and a lot of the parochialism. That was one of the big problems they had, and that we've got to do this as a region, because we can't do it. We can't afford to do it individually anymore. We don't have the resources, so we're come together. Yeah.
Now, you wrote a report in the year 2000 titled "Wisconsin's Economy in the Year 2010."
Right.
And here we are.
The
2000 was right off of a big boom era. Things were looking up. How does your report compare? I mean, in terms of what you were thinking was going to be like then and kind of how it's playing out.
Well, I mean, in 2000, I think we started this a little before then, so we didn't have the most recent data, but we were coming off the longest economic expansion in history, through the 90s. So things were looking pretty rosy, and in our big manufacturing base that we are so strong in, and with some help, we projected out what the numbers would be, through the various industries and such. In some cases, we were a little more optimistic, certainly with this business cycle. I mean, this has been, the worst recession since the Depression. So that's a little tough to factor in, 10 years prior to the...
But you did factor in, and you kind of, in the report, you talked about population as being a potential problem.
Right.
So maybe talk about that. How does the baby boomer blip and all the stuff going on with that, how does that impact our economy?
Well, that's on the human resource component that we had. And you mentioned the baby boomers. That's 83 million people that were born between 46 and 64.
Not just here, though.
Not just in Wisconsin, right? Across the country, and that was on top of essentially the existing population.
Right.
So it was a huge growth in economic or in human capital.
Yeah.
And in a very short time, in a 20-year period, and had huge changes globally, even on economics and social policy and on and on. These were active people, and for the most part, they came much better educated than the previous generation. So they were smart, they were active, and they had just the mass to do a lot of things they wanted to do.
And then your thoughts then, even then, looking forward, as we would have an issue.
Right.
As that retirement, as we start facing that retirement.
Right, and we talk about the pig and the python, you know, and it's slowly moving through the pig now, and I mean, those baby boomers born in 1946 were eligible for limited term benefits in, was it 2008, 2009?
Yeah.
And they'll be 65, right, in 2011.
Right.
So as rapidly as they filled this system and affected schools and everything else, they're going to be, for the most part, dropping off the other end and exiting the workforce.
Well, you had said in 2000 that we need incentives for baby boomers to prolong their careers.
Right.
So you were already saying, even in 2000, we better watch out. There's going to be a crisis.
Right.
In terms
we've known it's been there. I mean, it's, they were born, demographic data is about the best data we have. As I say, every hour you all get an hour older, and that's not going to change. So we knew when this was going to happen. And we knew it for Social Security, Medicare, and all these other programs, that it's just there.
Right.
And it's highly visible, and you can see it in all the curves.
Right.
So how do we keep these people in the workforce? Well, I was hoping we would have different incentives than an economic recession this bad to keep them in. But the focus of the talent, making it worth their while to stay in the workforce, either because it's enjoyable or they have some contribution to make. And some of them have to stay in because of income and benefits and things like that. And the new generation, the new 60s, the old 40s. So there's a little more vim and vigor in the senior population, and they want to stay involved.
That's right. And there's a lot of intellectual capital just based on history, based on continuity. That they bring to the table, that once that's gone, you lose all of that within an organization.
Right. There's the expertise, the experience, and just the historical knowledge, And we saw in those born, after 1940 or so, there was a large ramp up in the education attainment level, like 30 percentage points in the late 50s and early 60s. And that's pretty much flattened out since, and there's various reasons for that, I think. But you are going to be losing, that ratchet up of the intellectual talent in the workforce. I mean, hopefully we continue to make some educational attainment gains, but they won't be as rapid or stark.
Now, one of the questions then, and let's get into that whole education piece then on that, because that was one of the other things you talked about, even in 2000. At that point, you were talking about the need to enhance employee training and the continuing ed. But now there's becoming a lot of emphasis on what percentage of our population has the 2-year and the 4-year degree.
Right.
And there's something that translates economically, and maybe you can talk about that.
Right. Well, yeah, we use educational attainment as a proxy for skills, because we know how many in the population have a high school degree, less than that, a GED, etc., all the way up. So we use that data as a proxy for skill set. And we can see that. We know it by age group. We know how it's moving through. We know the earnings associated with that. And we also can compare it to other states and other countries and things like that. And if we are in a new knowledge economy, we are going to have to maximize our knowledge resource to be able to innovate and carry on. So, and I don't know if that answers the whole question, but that's where we're headed. So if we have to continue to increase that to compete globally.
But that also implicates boomers as well then. I mean, we need to be talking about education as one of the pathways for competitiveness and employability, and probably the primary.
I would say yes, and the reason I say that is because we have 2 workforce issues, challenges in Wisconsin, the upper Midwest in particular, and we have a quantity problem and we have a quality problem. And when I talk about the quantity problem, with the baby boomers moving through and leaving the workforce, our population in Wisconsin continues to increase, but our workforce flattens out. And by 2030, 35, it may actually turn negative, because by then I'll be 80, 85 years old and probably not in the workforce, and I'm in the middle of that baby boom, so we're going to be losing a lot of
more
workers.
people leaving than entering.
Right,
workforce.
right. It gets about, yeah, and it's about the same at that point, but you know, if you're looking at precise numbers, we've got a projection that shows that by 2035 it'll actually be on the decline, because the birth rates obviously these days are a lot lower than they were for the baby boomers. About half. They've climbed up a little bit. So we've got that quantity piece, that there's just not going to be as many workers, and the growth in the workforce isn't going to be there. So unless you increase the productivity of each worker, I mean, your whole economy can flatten out. And how you increase productivity in this country is you got to raise the skill levels and match it with the technology, so each worker can essentially produce more output with the tools they have.
So we're not talking about working more hours. What you mean by productivity is by increasing the skill base, there is going to be other kinds of occupations with higher wages that the person's going to be able to move into.
Right, right. And when we talk about productivity, it's usually, you know, output. Well, you can measure output per worker or output per hour, right? We have to increase that because one, so we can pay the worker more, so that they can increase their standard of living, and two, just because if we want to grow the economy, we have to generate more output, and essentially, if you're doing it with the same number of workers, you have to increase the productivity side of it.
Give us some examples of that. What would be some, you know, in terms of what that would look like? I'm a boomer, or maybe I'm going into college right now, and I'm thinking about what do I need to do? What does this mean for me? What should I be focused on?
Well, if you're going into college and you're going to be in the U.S., we have to compete on the technology side. So the innovation, the creativity, the ability to run the technology that we use on a day-to-day basis for production. And one of the things that Alan Greenspan, the former Fed chair, was saying, that we have a huge dichotomy now in the fact that our workforce is unable to, or I should say in a different way, our workforce is not properly matched with the capital technology we have. So we're at this point, we have a relatively low set of skills to be able to compete with the technology we have. I mean, we've got some of the best technology in the world, and have had for a long time, and probably will continue to for some extent, but we have to keep that technology moving. We have to match the skill set with that technology for the total productivity output. And if we don't do that, then we're in a bit of a bind. Yeah.
So one level, I'm just now thinking in terms of the practical, is the IT skills, meaning our ability to use computers, use the technology associated with computers. But we're also talking about within the manufacturing sector as well, that there are technologies available for the kind of work you can do. And we need to fine-tune those skill sets to bring them up as well.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I don't. You know, if you've been in them. You know, you go to. The other day, I was in the Milwaukee Area Technical College new Advanced Manufacturing Energy Center. You know, fabulous thing. But it is the machinery they have in there. It's you hardly touch anything but a keypad. Okay, you might put a piece of stock in there, right? And then you program the whole machine, and you close the cover, and you turn it on, and come back to 10,000 parts maybe. And you have to be able to program essentially that computer. And it's getting more sophisticated all the time, so that not only do you program it you have to transfer essentially one language to another, maybe a blueprint language to a CNC machine language, put it in there, put in all the measurements, know your stock is in there, what's the maintenance turnaround on this machine, how many hours has it been running, et cetera, et cetera. And you can't do that with essentially a high school education without further training.
And you kind of embedded the solution strategy in your example when someone says, "Oh, I don't know how to do that," but that's the point. That's why it's at the Milwaukee Area Technical College.
Right.
It's there to train you in how to use these systems. And the technical college, which we have in abundance throughout our state, and many people around the world regard it as one of the top quality education institutions. It really, in this kind of economy, it seems to me that this is where the adaptation is. that system is designed to help us move through these difficult times?
Well, I think it's critical in a number of ways. One, it's where the latest R&D technology gets transferred to the shop floor through these machines. I mean, the people that are designing the machines and making the machines that then the people will operate to make product, right? They have to be willing to do that. So that's where the tech transfer on the technology comes to the floor, is that and the training through the tech colleges, and it's upgrading all the time. When I was down there, they were talking about how they had a 5-axis CNC machine in now, and I didn't know what that was, right? Okay. So, and it's an upgrade from a 3-axis.
Because I wasn't quite sure. Well, if it's an upgrade from a 3-axis, now that all makes sense.
And it was up from a 3-axis machine, and it's about the number of ways you can go about milling essentially a piece of material into the end product. Wow. So you don't have to set it as much, so you can be much more precise, and it's faster, and hence the increase in productivity.
Less mistakes and all of the other things.
Yeah, better quality and more of them in a unit of time.
And so when we talk about strategies, if I'm an adult and I'm wondering what do I need to do next, I need to be looking at the 2-year college system as a place to figure out what career pathway is going to get me back into the workforce, or is going to keep refining and developing my skill set so I maintain my employability. And it's really both. We should not be, I guess we're at a point in our culture where learning isn't through the lifespan, it's continuous through the lifespan. It's constant.
We talk about cradle to grave learning now, because you have to bring it into your lifestyle as a constant, because things are changing so fast. And they're going to continue to change. Again, at the tech college, the woman that was showing us around said that when we come out of this recession, your worker's going to have to be up 2 levels of skills. Now, she didn't define what level was, but the point was that it's moving fast, and it's new, and it's creative, and you're going to have to continue to keep up with it. Otherwise, you're not contributing. And that's a lot to ask of a worker. That's a lot to ask of the tech colleges, the universities, K through 12, whatever the case might be. But it's necessary now, because like I say, we can't compete on labor globally. Cost of labor.
That's amazing. Bernard, are we getting any questions coming through yet? None. Well, we need people who might be watching to give us some questions. We have someone here ready to get them sent over so we can ask Mr. Winters some more specifics at things that might come up. Let's talk about the pathways now. One of the neat things that I saw the work that you did with David Ward and looking at focusing on what we do best in Wisconsin. Let's not try to figure out what everyone else is doing. Let's figure out what our industries are, and then let's design the education pathways around that kind of pipeline into those areas. And so you saw there was a need to redo manufacturing. So you go from a particular turbine into windmills. I mean, those are things that are innovative, but they're not beyond what we already have as a capability. And in addition to that, we've also got these 79 pathways and such. And in our conversation earlier, you were talking about those as being something that we can start focusing on, and maybe you can talk about that. And I'm thinking through the lifespan again, someone who's saying, what do I want to do now? And how these pathways could actually align up pretty well for that individual.
Well, yeah. I mean, you need skills. You need prerequisites for those skills to develop into whatever you're going to do. And the interesting part is now, and I want to interject this a little bit, is that when I was in high school, right, there were 2 paths. You went university path, or you went work path, right, jobs path, and you were on 2 different learning tracks. Well, now there's no difference. The skills you need to go into the workforce are the same skills you need as an entering college freshman, between the English, the mathematics, the science, and even the folks that are developing the HVAC systems down at MATC, they were talking about, I mean, you come in here, you have to know algebra, you have to know geometry, you have to know trigonometry, right? You have to know how to read plans, you have to know how to fabricate this kind of thing. So at the K through 12 level, there's not that much difference now as you go on into the skill set.
No matter what the industry is,
no matter
set. It's almost like the liberal arts that would have been at the college level is now needing to happen at the pre-college level.
No matter which industry, no matter which pursuit you take. And then with those, what I would call technical skills in this case, come all the soft skills that employers are.
And I heard someone say that if they're
about.
so soft, why are they so difficult to teach?
Well, some of it is, it doesn't get taught in the classroom, and some of it does, but it's, do you show up on time? Do you get along with people? Can you take directions?
Right.
Do you understand how you fit into the whole system?
And there's initiative, there's goal setting.
Well, there's discipline
engagement.
and there's discipline, right?
Yeah. And these, again, aren't things that are necessarily, I didn't get it in high school, I'm done. This is stuff that we can learn throughout the lifespan as well. I mean, these are
Right.
the core skills
Right.
that we need in the
Right.
workforce.
Right.
And there's opportunities to continue learning those skills.
The fastest growing occupational skill sets right now are non-routine analytical.
Mm-hmm.
So every day you have to come in and find out the solution to a new problem.
Mm-hmm.
It just changes that fast. You've got to be able to do that kind of thing, especially on the creative side,
Mm-hmm.
as we have to compete. The fastest growing one is non-routine interactive.
Mm-hmm.
So not only every day do you have to come in and find a new solution to a problem, but you've got to work with other people to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you're in engineering, say, you got to work with sales, you got to work with production, management, finance, and those people might not be in the same building, much less the same time zone anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to be able to handle all that kind of stuff, and that's a lot of the soft skills. Can you stay on task? Can you multitask? Can you get along in communication skills?
Mm-hmm.
So that if I'm asking you a question, is it clear to you that when I show up the next morning, say, I'm going to have a blue ball instead of a red ball that I can't use?
Well, and one of the things that you bring up that's critical, we talk about, you got to get along with people. You just described 4 different units of an organization that do not, if I'm an engineer in that conversation, they don't know what I know. So it's not just the ability to get along, it's translation. It's the ability to hear their perspectives and take in new ideas. So that kind of adaptive ability to adapt to the change within the organization.
And to some extent, somewhere you got to be speaking the same language, and they have to explain it at different levels. The engineer to the
It's not just all
production person to
specialized
the
knowledge.
sales.
There's a general set of knowledge that you have to have.
Because you're not operating in a vacuum anymore, and you have to convey that, and you're going to have different personalities, within that too.
And it seems like when people say, well, where am I supposed to learn that? It seems to me that this is what colleges are doing right now. That they're putting students in those kind of settings, in those kinds of demands.
Right.
In the classroom, you're working on class projects, you're working in groups, and that you haven't done it in a while, you can get back into it.
And it's something you learned. Again, when I was in school, it was bad form to look at somebody else's paper for the answer. Now they encourage everybody to work in teams, study in teams, work out the problems, come up with the answers in teams, because that's what it's going to be like.
That's how you do it.
That's how it is.
And I think the part that I think educators are learning as well is when it's done in teams, everyone learns more.
Right.
And that's the key.
Right.
If we're not all at the knowledge base, we lose. So if you have a business where you have one person who didn't get it and they're in a critical role, that whole project can go down.
It's the weakest link kind of concept, and you have to be able to get along with people and understand, and get to the level of communication, so when you don't understand something, well, let's drill down into it more, and you have to have, trust in the competence of the people you're working with.
So some other questions we have on here that have come in, and this is kind of the frustrating part. We have a beautiful place to live. Wisconsin's kind of gorgeous, especially on a day like this when the weather's getting nice and feels
nice.
like winter may be gone forever.
I enjoy winter,
forever.
so, yeah.
Well, winters are fun too, but it's nice to get into the warmth. Yet we've got industries that are looking at other states as being more attractive.
Right.
What's going on there? Why aren't we keeping, and it may be things we've already talked about, but people are picking up and leaving. Companies, people, and I'm thinking now just in terms of the companies, as we're losing companies.
Right, but we're also creating companies.
Okay.
That's what we don't hear about. We always hear about GM going down. This is a 100-year-old car manufacturer. We're out, they used to employ 10,000 down to 4, now 2,000 of people. They've shut down the plant. So we're out that many people. But what we don't hear about is all the little businesses that start up and how they're replacing it, 1, 2, 10 employees at a time. Now, obviously, it takes a lot of those. But they're small, they're agile, they're on the cutting edge of things. If you're building SUVs and they're real popular, but the price of gas goes to $4, that presents a problem, and obviously they couldn't adapt fast enough. But small companies, they have to. Entrepreneurs have to. And if you look at the data on growth and even employees, the number of workers by business size, there's the number of establishments and the number of workers working for large companies is going down. And the fastest growing ones are the small companies. And we're almost, the last numbers I looked at, even with these big layoffs, we were at just about net even with the number of jobs created by small businesses to replace the big 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 big old line manufacturers. So we can do it with entrepreneurism, and then those are fast growing businesses too. For one reason, they start small. So if you had one person to a 10-person shop, you've grown by 10%.
It seems like that's a whole shift in thinking. The idea that we're waiting for a multinational to come in and save us by creating jobs.
There's a lot of resources spent trying to do that, yes.
Versus an entrepreneurial attitude that we're growing new small business. And maybe you can talk not only about what that means as a shift, but what are the skill sets that are involved? Because we've got a lot of people, I've got to believe, we've got a lot of talent that with just a little bit of education could open up a small business. You're mentioning it's happening. So what are those skill sets that go into becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, anybody that trains or tries to educate an entrepreneur, the first thing they'll tell you is not everybody can be an entrepreneur. It's a personality thing, and I don't profess to have the drive you need to be a serial entrepreneur, but those that have it, they need drive, they need commitment, they need to take risk, they need to just be adaptable and agile, because a lot of the product they started with may not be the end product coming out, because the way either the technology's changed, their idea has changed, or the marketplace has changed. And that's why when investment capitalists, for example, venture capitalists, they'll tell you, we'll take a C product and A management, long before they'll take C management and an A product.
So it's not about the individual having all the ideas and all of the information. It's about an attitude, and then they're going to bring in some of the other people into the equation that may have the product lines, may have expertise. If there's, they have to have the attitude around the organization of that whole process.
If they're smart, right? And you're a starting entrepreneur and you're smart, you will bring in the people with the talent, because there are very few people that are creative, inventive, and good managers. And I think good salespeople and good
that have all of those people, soft skills that we've been talking about. But you added in risk taking. You added in that kind of drive that comes. It's a little bit extra.
You got to be committed. And most companies fail. We all know that.
But that person, if they keep going at it, eventually will learn from the failures and keep moving.
Right. Well, that's the story we used to tell. If you started a company, if you were in California, and you started a company and failed, they picked you right up and they dusted you off, and probably gave you some more money to go at it again. And we talk about in Wisconsin, if you're a failure, you're a bum. Just because the attitude is different.
And we need to change that.
We need to change that. You learn so much by failing. Everybody knows that.
That's right.
They're hard lessons, but they're well-learned lessons.
Well, and the issue is we have to stop personalizing failure. And we can see that from the current economy. Right.
We all like winners, and I mean, there's all stories. Abraham Lincoln on through all the failures they had before they found the success.
But I just wanted to add one more piece to that, and that is in Wisconsin, we seem to have a lot of that high-end research that's just waiting for entrepreneurs to bring it down. And maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the industry areas or some examples of what's going on in Wisconsin that we don't know about. It's not in the papers. But if the right entrepreneur walked in, they're going to be able to connect up with some of this stuff. And it could really help not only increase the number of jobs, but economically could have a huge opportunity for our state.
Well, there is, and it's going on all over the state. I mean, we have, the University of Madison, Tier 1 university, brings in, $1 billion a year in federal research dollars, and we've got breakthrough technologies from nanotechnology to stem cell research and all that kind of thing going on in the other campuses around the state. There's other things going on too. A professor in Stevens Point with nanowires, you know, a new technology. And there's a gent in Platteville that has some clean a way to clean, you know, very sensitive high test optics, right? It's kind of a film they spray on and peel off, right? And then there's just other companies, you know, all over the place on recycling and waste things and composite materials, you know, for wind turbines and food processing things. I mean, they're all over the place. And some of them are known and many of them are not, because they're just not on the radar yet. Yeah.
And that seems to be where one of the big gaps is, right? That we've got things going on that people aren't connected to.
Right. And that's always hard.
That change,
that's always hard, because there's a lot of people out there, and, you know, there's just, you never know where it's coming from. There's, you know, I say it's like playing a game Battleship, you know. I mean, you're trying to fill every hole, you know, on the board to you know, to float or sink the battleship, you know. So it's kind of a beat in the bushes game, yeah. And some will come forward, but that's the thing we're trying to develop. And when we talked about it, when David Ward and North Star Economics, we were working on was a competitive intelligence network. So trying to link the financiers with the managers, with the entrepreneurs, with the risk capitalists, with the bench R&D, with the tech transfer, not so they were just all swimming around in a, you know, primordial pool hoping to bump into each other and mutate and, you know, crawl out, but rather a more formal process, so you can mix these things in the right, you know, in the right measures, and have something pop out the other end.
So I'm someone who, you know, I just described the skill sets, right, of what it takes to be an entrepreneur. Where could I go to learn more about building on that skill set and maybe taking the risk to look into that?
There's various places that some of the tech colleges have programs. I don't know them all, but I think up in the Northeast there's an eSeed program for entrepreneurs. The University of Wisconsin, I think, has yet a entrepreneurial training program. A lot of the business schools are focusing more on that because they are trying to change that mindset. You know, we had such a regimented mindset in this state and other places coming out of the Depression and the generation out of World War II and in a big industry. So everything was very regimented. And I think we've lost maybe a generation or two of that entrepreneurship, you know, that started the GMs and the paper companies in the state and things like that, you know, and the breweries and such.
Well, we can use the word imagination.
Imagination,
and the ability to really think about what's possible and what we can do with things.
I think we all have ideas. It's just we're kind of risk averse.
We're kind of risk averse.
I'm saying we're a little risk averse here compared to some other places.
Well, the good news then is that there are lots of resources out there for people who are interested in learning more about this without having to take a leap of starting a company. There's courses, there's programs, there's support systems all through the state.
Right. There's the Small Business Administration. There's the Small Business Development Corporation, the SBDC. There's in Wisconsin. There's the Wisconsin Entrepreneurs Network that's run here at the Extension.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then there's, you know, the Wisconsin Innovation Network and the Wisconsin Angel Network. And
once you get started looking, you're going to find a lot.
There's a wealth of information, not to mention all the county extension folks that are there to help.
Well, we do have a question from Linda Briggs Deneen, and she's wondering whether or not, as this whole loss of human capital occurs, are we going to stretch that 40-hour work week beyond limits? What's going to happen? You know, what's the impact is that going to have on our daily life?
Well, that will be interesting, because
that's not the answer we wanted. We wanted clarity. That said there's not going to be any change. There's federal laws, something in there.
There will be a solution.
Okay.
You know, there will be a solution. Now, what it is, you know, if it's incentives, you know, that you get, you know, quadruple time for overtime, you know, to incentivize you to stay.
Now that's sounding a little bit better.
Right.
Okay.
Well, possibly. Or, you know, we will send you to training so that you know how to run this new technology we coming
more efficiently
in to put it out. Right. Yeah. And that's the other part of this. I talked about the quantity side, but it's the quality side. If you don't have the talent, then you can't raise the productivity, you can't raise the standard of living, and you're facing an actual economic stagnation because there's no growth.
Right.
So that's mandatory, and with that comes the education and training we've been talking about,
Right.
to keep up.
It seems like before we begin saying we need to expand the week, we have to first look at our processes.
Right.
Are we working
Right.
as efficiently?
Right.
Are we working with the technology
Right.
tools to help make an easier time of the work that we're doing?
And I put a lot of faith in Yankee ingenuity. We've always been very good at the creativity and the innovative part of it, you know. And I think there is a difference when I look at that. I've heard that a person mentioned, the Apollo program, for example, was innovative, right? Went to the moon, where the space shuttle is creative, you know. Just a new technology to doing the same thing.
That's
so
right.
there's different ways of that, but each one has to advance. Yeah.
Another question from Linda has to do with the impact then from the organizational structure. How are they adapting, and maybe even some best practice strategies? Do you see some organizations that are already adapting to this whole change,
Right.
and the kind of the chaos? Of
Right. Well, if she could better define organization for us, that might help, and maybe she can follow up with that. But as far as an organization like industry, they get it. They know it's a talent. It's a global talent competition.
So how are they responding then to that?
Well, they're doing it in different ways. Some are hiring the talent. Some are growing their own talent, which is interesting. We all know Google now, and very innovative company. Always have been. And one of the things I think that keeps them going is the way they look at things, because they wanted workers. They wanted talented workers. But they took it to the next level, what I consider, and they looked at, because we kind of talked about quality of life, in the new economy. People want a lifestyle now. They want to live here and do a job, as opposed to get a job and live wherever it took. So recognizing that, Google went out and said, where do you want to work? Right? It wasn't like we're going to locate in, wherever they've got places, now they're out looking for other places, but it wasn't, and that's what was set up because there's a talent, it's a nice place. They were like, where do you want to work? And it all boiled down, they did this thing, some of the workers, and it came to a place, I haven't been out there, the Dells, the Dales in Oregon, the state of Oregon. People said it's a great place. So they located a facility there. I mean, who else is thinking that way?
No.
They're thinking production.
No.
Workers are still a cost,
Right.
Instead of the investment
right.
that they have to be to forward.
right.
So that's just a whole other, approach to it, and an innovative. And I got a hunch if they keep thinking like that, they'll keep winning some of the battles.
They'll keep bringing in the better workers, because it is competitive. Now, we've got examples of businesses that are growing talent by connecting with high schools.
Right.
And bringing things
Right.
in. You've mentioned some. What are some of the examples of that? Because it seems to me that's another area if we had a growth industry, getting businesses connecting with our high schools, bringing in technologies and all,
Right.
it's just a great opportunity.
Well, I think again there's a public-private partnership. I mean, we're seeing the downside on the public side of an economic recession, and what we're trying to do with the resources we have. And so business can partner with education, for example, in the high schools, and in Brillion, a little town, east of Lake Winnebago, up in the northeast part of Wisconsin, north. Aaron's company built a facility, and as I understand it, I think it's Mike Sweeney that runs the program, and as I understand it, they give the students one direction, and it's you have to create the new prototype for Learjet. And that's it, and the class is oversubscribed. And they have to come in, they have to learn math, they have to learn geometry, part of it, they have to learn aerodynamics, they have to learn materials, because at the end they have to have a flying model. Now it's not going to be, some supersonic transport, but they have to get, a plane off the ground and have it fly. So they need internal combustion.
They have to learn. They have to put it together.
And the kids dig it, because every day they're working with stuff and working in teams and figuring this out and plotting it out and making it. And like I say, they don't have enough room, even with this nice new facility. And the parents are all over it. They're like, how do I get my kid into that class? So, and then Aaron's hires some kids right out of it.
Right.
They do that class and they're right into Yeah, it's
Well, I think that one of the things that Wisconsin is known for is the apprenticeship program
right.
that goes
Yeah,
on, and there isn't enough investment in it. I mean, it's a perfect solution that we need more businesses connected
Right.
to. And it's the kind of thing that as they can see the skill base and as they can invest in the schools to build that skill base, it seems to me that that's one of the big issues we have. You've mentioned the population issues. Every 18 to 24-year-old who leaves the state is now a big loss. And we need to be looking at organizations that see itself as trying to attract in the next generation to stay within that local community.
Right. And I talked about you have to, like, as people ask me which comes first, the chicken or the egg. Do you need the talent or do you need the job? There isn't a chicken and egg. You got to do them at the same time, because if you have all this talent and they have no job, they're going to leave. And if you have these jobs and no talent, they're going to go in search of the talent. So if you don't have them both, you end up with neither. And that's critical, and that's an economic development strategy, and a capital strategy, and a management strategy, and an education strategy, and a business development strategy that has to come together. There's not a single solution.
Yeah. Now, something coming in from the Manitowoc Chamber is, as we look at just coming back now to the baby boomers and they are needing to work, and some of this is now economic. It's not just
That's right.
because it would have been nice to do. There's actually an economic incentive. How do you see it impacting on the current population of adults who have to go back to school to retrain? That's one of the issues that's coming up.
Well, yeah, and what's different in this economy that they just can't put off retirement for a year or so is the big wealth destruction that happened in their investment portfolios and their homes, which is what most people have as their retirement nest egg. It's going to be a hard slog for them if they haven't done any training for the last 30 years, say. If they've had their job and they've done it, and they kind of kept up with the new technology as it was introduced to the shop floor, but they're going to find it a different world coming back, and which brings me back to Dorothy at MATC, that you're going to have to be 2 levels up in your skill sets coming out of this recession. And I think those that haven't been training, if they've been laid off, and they haven't been getting some kind of training over the last 2 years, they're going to find a different environment.
But now, how do you see, and one of the strategies we talked about was looking at a 2-year college for retooling some things. What about for like baby boomers that are coming out of manufacturing?
Right.
What are their options that in terms of getting back in?
Right, and well, they've got a lot of options, and I think one, maybe we didn't quite answer the question all the way of the baby boomers staying in, because they have to. Sooner or later, and that's good. I mean, they'll have a history, they'll have some expertise, they'll probably be productive, they'll probably be willing, good employees, but at a certain point, when they turn 70 or 75, they're just not going to have the productivity for various reasons. But they're going to be able to come in. There's all big growth yet in healthcare and social services and things like that. I mean, if they're sharp of mind and the body's given out a little bit, there's all kinds of interactive, non-routine interactive that they've got experience and knowledge and wisdom that they're going to be able to help on their jobs. If they know nothing else but, running a hand lathe, I think they're going to be out of work.
So one of the things coming, we have older adults that are looking at age as a big factor, and they're not feeling as employable.
Right.
But what you just mentioned are some critical things. What are you walking in with? You do have some assets.
Well, accentuate the positive, and what assets do you have to bring? But you may be facing a different recalibration of your value to the employer, because you may have been 30 years someplace and getting annual raises and bumps for this, that, and the other thing, with no skill enhancement. Well, that's not going to cut it anymore. You're gonna get paid according to your value, and there's not going to be any artificial tears in there.
Yeah. Now, if you were given advice to someone who's looking to become one of the new workers, they're looking at what education pathways and industry pathways.
Right.
What are those areas in Wisconsin that we should be focusing on? And I know biotech is one that everyone talks about, but that's not the only industry.
Right. Well, 48 states want a biotechnology center, so not to mention numerous, international centers. That I really can't answer that question, and I'll tell you why. It's because, one, things change so fast. I don't want to put anybody into a job that has got great opportunities if it's going to be away, in 5 years. I mean, I use the example of a webmaster, right? I mean, that was going to be a hot job. It was going to be great. What a future! Well, 5 years later, there's no use for them. You got middle schoolers that are building websites and everything else. So, and the other thing is, and I know it's hard when you got bills to pay, but I don't like to give anybody advice to go into a job that they're going to regret getting up every morning.
So finding something that's meaningful for you.
Meaningful, and adapt your lifestyle to it instead of trying to adapt your job to your lifestyle. That might be a little tougher, but I would think, think out of the box, think creative, and keep exploring.
Well, and that's the link between the career and workforce, that if you haven't done the career development and really understood what your unique skills, interests are, and that could be much more important in terms of defining a pathway than what's necessarily available in your backyard.
And I mean, and there's ways there's all kinds of tests you can take to figure out what you do well. If you like working with your hands, right? Get the training that allows you to do that. I mean, I knew a guy got a PhD in chemistry because he liked to work with tools, and do hand stuff. It just, that gave him the opportunity to work in the lab to do that kind of thing, and then there's other people that all they want to do is teach, for example, so you have to get appropriate skills for that. So
we've got a couple minutes left. I had another question in the sense of, for the economic success, it seems like we have three major stakeholders. We've got the citizens, we've got our businesses, and then we have our state and local governments.
Okay.
What should be the plan of action right now, given the situation we're in, but also this is an example of what we're going to be facing for a long period of time? So what are the roles and responsibilities of each of those groups? What should we be doing as a citizen?
I would say sell your assets, build your assets, your personal assets, and again, we're talking skill sets, knowledge.
Keep learning.
Keep learning. Keep advancing. Keep pushing out the creative frontiers. Going forward that way. Keep contributing, because I mean, you can go to work every day, but then go home, but you're going to have to do some more community work, because you either pay it in tax. It's either time or money. You either pay it in taxes or you give them time. So I would say be willing to do more of that, because then you build a whole nother network, and you never know where opportunities come from.
So you have to build your own social capital as an individual. So it's not just the knowledge capital. You got to have interconnections with your community and with others, and not just inside your community. It can be a national, international community as well.
Oh, yeah. I would recommend some way to get, if not physically there,
social networking,
communicatively connected worldwide, and learn different cultures, learn things that all that is an asset to a company that is looking for non-routine interactive people.
And I guess what's critical is you're saying, as a citizen, I need to continue seeking out growth opportunities. And those can be vocational, they can also be avocational. It could be the things that you learn because you just absolutely enjoy, could end up being an entrepreneurial activity later on. So it's really just enjoying but learning as you go along and not stagnating.
I know a few dancers had aspirations to be performing dancers, and instead they're teaching kinesiology or sports fitness folks or something like that.
That's right. What about briefly then, what about the role of business? Well, I think some models have to change, but we don't have time to get into that. But I think business, and with the what we call the decorporatization of business, or the internationalization or the globalization of business, there are fewer corporate headquarters, as they say, and they have tentacles more. So they're not as much of a trustee in the communities in which they operate. I think they should try to do that more. I think they owe their workers something, because some of that social contract has been broken. 30 years, you get the gold watch and a pension. Now, 29 years, you're fired, you get nothing. Your pension's gone. There's not that partnership anymore. So employers have to be careful that they expect what they expect from their employees,
depending on how they treat them. And they're also going to have to, I think, be involved more in the public side of things. There's going to have to be more public-private partnerships because there's mutual benefit from that. And any small business person will tell you that.
Well, we know that business is going to come and go quickly because this is what's happening.
Right.
But what you're saying is, while they're here, they can actually be a good public citizen, and they can have. It's almost like the athletes that come in are giving back to the community in ways. It's a short term in some cases. Hopefully, it's long term. You just never know.
Well, and a lot of them do. To be fair, I mean, a lot of them do, and it's not known. Most of them have foundations, and they're there, and they contribute to the arts and the libraries and the ball fields, and things like that. And a lot of that doesn't get realized. They're just, some people are just profit mongers, and they live in big houses. I think it needs to expand, but I think if they want to attract talent, they are going to have to make the quality of life in that community attractive to that talent.
Got it. Yeah. Good. Well, thank you. This has been great.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Well, this has been a special edition of An Afternoon Tea, our conversations on career and workforce development practice, which was co-sponsored and coordinated by the Center on Education and Work at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and the Chamber of Manitowoc County as part of their Adult Learner Series. To find out more about the Adult Learner Series, go to the Chamber of Manitowoc at manitowocchamber.com. That's one word. MANITOWOC chamber.com. Also visit the Center on Education and Work's website at cew.wisc.edu to find out about our annual careers conference, our online career information system, the WISC Career System, as well as any other professional development opportunities we have for translating career and workforce policy and research into practice. Also, information on how to view other afternoon tea conversations we've had will be on the site. I also want to recognize a number of people who have been involved in bringing this conversation to you, including Linda Fitch at Lakeshore Technical College, Susan Speth at UW Extension, Bernard Sue from the Center on Education and Work. Thank you, as always, to the Pyle Center and UW Extension for their facility and the technology support in putting together a quality production. And on behalf of the Chamber of Manitowoc County and the Center on Education and Work, I also want to express our thanks to Dennis Winters for today's conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott.